The snow was falling gently outside our dining room window, soft flakes catching the golden glow of the Christmas lights that wrapped around the house like a warm memory. Inside, the fireplace crackled. The scent of roasted turkey filled the air, mixing with cinnamon, cloves, and that unmistakable comfort of the holidays. Claire was smiling as she poured wine into her glass, humming along to the carols playing from the old speaker we kept on the counter. I watched her from across the table, wondering, just for a second, if this was what peace looked like. Maybe it was. Maybe we'd finally built something close to normal. Lila sat between us, her small frame bundled in a red dress with a white collar. Her hair was tied with a velvet ribbon, and her eyes, those wide, silent eyes, stared at the untouched food on her plate. I leaned over a bit, noticed the turkey hadn't been touched. Neither had the mashed potatoes, or the cranberry sauce, which she usually loved. "You all right, sweetheart?" I asked softly. She didn't speak, didn't nod, just sat there, frozen, staring straight ahead, like she was waiting for something, or dreading it. Claire didn't seem to notice. She was talking about the neighbors, how we should finally host a New Year's gathering, how the Johnsons next door had invited us over for drinks on the 30th. I reached for my glass, then paused. There was something under Lila's plate, just a sliver of white, barely poking out from beneath the porcelain. I slid the plate slightly to the side. A napkin, crumpled. I picked it up, thinking maybe it had fallen or been used to wipe her mouth, even though she hadn't eaten. It was folded strangely, tight, small, tucked like a secret. I opened it. 3 letters, written in messy, uneven handwriting. The kind that comes from a child trying to write fast, or while shaking. Help. Just that. 1 word, pressed into the fabric like it had been scrawled with the weight of fear. I looked at her. She didn't look back. Claire continued talking, laughing now. Something about the casserole being overcooked. I wasn't listening anymore. My fingers tightened around the napkin. Lila blinked, finally, slowly. Then, as if she sensed I was watching her, she turned her head. Our eyes met, and for the first time, I noticed something that sent a cold trail down my spine. Her eyes weren't just blank. They were pleading. Not the tantrum of a child wanting to skip dinner. Not even fear in the usual sense. It was deeper, like she was trapped, like she was trying to scream without sound. I smiled at her gently. "Claire," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Did Lila eat lunch today?" "She picked at her sandwich," she said, reaching for the bottle of wine again. "She's been a little off lately. Probably just excitement." I nodded, but inside me something had shifted. Something was wrong, and I had just stepped into it. That morning, everything had looked perfect. Sunlight filtered through the frosted windows in warm streaks, catching the gentle swirl of snow outside. I woke to the smell of pancakes and cinnamon. Claire already downstairs humming to herself. She always hummed on holidays. Something soft, repetitive, familiar, but never quite identifiable. Lila was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, still in her pajamas, surrounded by wrapping paper and half-open boxes. Her hair was a mess of sleepy curls, and the glow of the Christmas tree lights danced in her eyes. I kissed the top of her head. "Merry Christmas," I whispered. She looked up at me, slow, then nodded. "Merry Christmas, Daddy." Her voice was small, thin, like she hadn't used it in days. Claire called from the kitchen. "Coffee's ready." I watched Lila quietly tug at the corner of a box she hadn't opened yet. Her fingers moved without eagerness, like she was going through the motions. "You okay, bub?" I asked, crouching beside her. She nodded again, mechanically, but I noticed her hands were shaking. I didn't ask more. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe she had one of those child moods that bloom and fade like a sudden breeze. I tried to brush it off. We opened presents. Lila barely smiled, even when she got the toy horse she'd been begging for since October. I remember Claire looking at me with raised eyebrows, trying to silently say, "Is she sick?" But she wasn't sick. Not the way we understood it. After breakfast, I asked Lila if she wanted to build a snowman. She said no. I asked if she wanted to help me string popcorn for the tree like we used to do. Another no. Instead, she sat on the couch, knees to her chest, watching the snow fall. Claire tried. She read her a story, gave her a cup of cocoa with those tiny marshmallows she usually adored. Still nothing. She's just adjusting, Claire said finally, wiping her hands on a dish towel. New place. New school. It's a lot for a kid. That made sense. On the surface, we had moved into the house just over a month ago. Big yard, tall trees, a wraparound porch, exactly what we dreamed of. Claire had gotten a new position at the university, one she'd been working toward for years. I could do my work remotely. It all fell into place so easily, so smoothly, it almost felt unreal. But Lila hadn't adjusted. Not really. The first week, she had nightmares. Every night. Woke up screaming, clutching her blanket, gasping like she'd been underwater. She said there was someone in her closet. When I checked, of course, there was nothing there. I told her it was just a dream. She nodded, but I could see she didn't believe me. Then the drawing started. Crayon sketches, rough and dark. A woman with no eyes. A house with bars on the windows. A stick figure with tears falling like rain around it. Claire threw most of them away. She's got a vivid imagination, she said. But it wasn't just the drawings. Some mornings, I'd walk into the kitchen and find Lila standing in the hallway. Still, silent, staring at nothing. And once, I still feel it in my spine, I heard her whispering to someone in the guest bedroom. The door was closed. No one was in there. When I asked who she was talking to, she looked up at me and said, "The lady." "What lady?" I asked. She didn't answer, just walked away. Claire said it was an imaginary friend. That kids make those up all the time. I wanted to believe her. God, I tried. But I started to notice more. The way Lila flinched when Claire raised her voice, even slightly. The way she tensed when Claire walked into the room. The way her eyes never fully relaxed around her own mother. I chalked it up to stress. Change. Growing pains. Now, holding that napkin in my hands, I wondered if I'd been lying to myself all along. That day was supposed to be perfect. A new chapter. Our first Christmas in the new house. But the signs had been there, layered beneath the tinsel and fake snow. Hidden in plain sight. And now I couldn't unsee them. Lila hadn't eaten her dinner, but she had written a single word. Help. The day after Christmas, I found another drawing under Lila's bed. It was tucked between the wooden slats and the floor, as if it had slipped through by accident. But when I unfolded it, I knew better. It had been hidden, buried like a secret. The drawing was done in red crayon, thick and messy. A house with a single window, blacked out with what looked like vertical bars. Inside the window was a small figure. Alone. Outside the house stood another figure, taller, its face scribbled out. Surrounding it were smaller stick figures lying flat, like they had fallen, or been pushed. At the bottom, in trembling uppercase letters, Lila had written, "She is still here." I stared at it for a long time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the hallway, back against the wall outside Lila's room. The soft hum of the heater filled the silence, interrupted only by the occasional pop of wood in the walls. Old house noises, I told myself. Just settling. But sometime after midnight, I heard it. A whisper. Not Lila's voice. It was lower, slower, like it dragged itself through the air. I stood, took a step closer to Lila's door. The whispering stopped. I opened the door. Quietly. She was asleep, curled up in a ball beneath the blankets. But her face was twisted in something close to terror. Brows pulled tight, mouth slightly open, fingers gripping the edge of her pillow like a lifeline. I stepped into the room and reached to smooth her hair. And then I noticed the cold. Her room was freezing, much colder than the rest of the house. I glanced at the vent. It was open. The heat should have been running through. But it wasn't. The air was dead. Still, a movement caught my eye. In the corner, near the closet door, something shifted. I spun toward it. Nothing. Just her coat rack. But it hadn't looked like a coat rack a second ago. It had looked like a figure. A woman. Watching. I backed out slowly, heart pounding, and closed the door without a sound. Downstairs, Claire was waiting, sitting in the armchair, wine in hand. Her eyes were half-lidded, her expression unreadable. You're jumpy, she said without looking up. Just checking on her, I replied. She sipped. She's fine. You're worrying too much. I didn't answer. Didn't mention the whisper. The cold. The drawings. The next morning, I made a decision. I walked down the street to the old couple who lived 3 houses over. The Mackenzies. We'd only spoken once before when we moved in. They seemed kind, the sort who had lived there forever. When I brought up the house, Mrs. Mackenzie's expression changed. Slightly, but enough. You bought that place, she asked. I nodded slowly. Strange history, that house, she said, her tone turning cautious. Folks don't usually stay long. Why not? I asked. She glanced at her husband, who cleared his throat and muttered something about rumors and silly stories. Mrs. Mackenzie smiled, suddenly dismissive. Old town talk. Probably nothing. You know how people get. But I could tell. She knew something, and she wasn't going to say it out loud. I walked back home with the pressure building behind my eyes. That evening, as I helped Lila put away her new toys, she tugged my sleeve. Daddy, she whispered, the lady doesn't like when I talk to you. I froze. I looked at her. Her lips trembled. Her eyes didn't meet mine. Which lady? I asked. She pointed to the hallway. There was nothing there. Just the shadows stretching from the dim light in the living room. She watches from the dark, she whispered. She told me not to eat. She said Mommy would be mad if I did. My skin went cold. I crouched to meet her eyes. Did Mommy say that to you? No, she said. The lady did. But she sounds like Mommy. Sometimes. I couldn't speak. She leaned closer and whispered one last thing before crawling into bed. She lives in the doll. The one I didn't open. I hadn't thought twice about the extra box. It was wrapped in gold foil paper, no tag, no handwriting. I assumed Claire had bought it last minute and forgotten to label it. It had sat beneath the tree all morning, untouched while Lila opened her other presents one by one, her little hand slow and uncertain. The toy horse, a puzzle, a picture book about wolves in winter. None of them made her smile, but she at least acknowledged them, held them, turned the pages, stroked the plastic mane of the horse absently with her fingers. But when she picked up the gold box, something changed. She hesitated. Her fingers barely grazed the paper before she pulled them back like she'd been shocked. Her face paled, eyes wide, lips parted in a way I hadn't seen before. Not surprise, not curiosity. Dread. Claire noticed. What's wrong, sweetie? She asked gently. That one's for you. Lila looked at me, then back at the box. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a doll, old-fashioned, porcelain, with painted lashes and red lips, the kind you'd expect to see in a glass cabinet in someone's grandmother's house. Its dress was deep maroon with black trim, and its eyes were the palest blue I'd ever seen. Too light, almost empty. Lila's breath caught in her throat. Then she screamed. The sound that tore out of her was not a cry of surprise. It was horror. She shoved the box off her lap, the doll tumbling out and landing face down on the carpet. Her legs kicked out, as if something were crawling up her. Claire rushed forward. Lila, what on earth? No, Lila shrieked. Don't touch it. Don't touch her. She scrambled behind the couch, sobbing, her voice shrill and cracking. Her entire body trembled. I ran to her, wrapping my arms around her small, shaking form. It's okay, I whispered. You're okay. Claire stood frozen by the tree, the doll lying still at her feet. I didn't buy that, she said. I looked up at her. What? I thought you did. I didn't wrap that gift. We stared at each other. Lila wouldn't stop crying. Even after we moved the doll to the attic and locked the hatch, she kept repeating the same words through her sobs. She lives in the doll. She lives in the doll. Claire tried to downplay it. She must have seen something scary online. Or in a movie. Kids soak this stuff up. But I hadn't let her watch anything unsupervised. Not once since we moved here. And the look in Lila's eyes when she saw that doll, no child could fake that. That was real, raw terror. That night, I waited until Claire was asleep. I crept up into the attic. The doll was where I left it, face down on the wooden floor. I knelt, slowly turned it over. Its porcelain face stared up at me with an eerie stillness. pale blue eyes that somehow seemed aware. There was something wedged in the doll's dress, a scrap of paper. I pulled it out and unfolded it under the flashlight. There were more of those messy, childlike letters. She told me to be quiet. She said Mommy is watching. My fingers tightened. I wrapped the doll in a towel and shoved it in a box, taped it shut, and hid it deep in the garage behind old furniture. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me through the walls. I barely slept, and sometime around 4 in the morning, I woke to the sound of footsteps. Not Claire's, not Lila's. They were slow, dragging, just outside our bedroom door. I held my breath, heart pounding. Then the steps stopped. Silence. I got up, opened the door, and found nothing. But Lila's bedroom light was on. She was sitting up in bed, eyes wide. "She's mad," she whispered. "Because you moved her." I didn't ask who. I already knew. The next morning, Claire acted like nothing had happened. She made pancakes, whistled while the coffee brewed, and asked Lila about her dreams like it was a normal day. Lila didn't answer. She barely ate, just picked at her food and stared at her plate in silence. "She needs routine," Claire said later, washing dishes. "We need to stop feeding into this fear." But it wasn't fear we were feeding. It was warning. And we were already too late to pretend it was nothing. I couldn't stop thinking about the footsteps, the whispering, the cold, and most of all, the way Lila had looked at me, like a prisoner who couldn't speak freely. After lunch, Claire said she was going to the store for wine. I waited until I heard her car pull away. Then I knocked gently on Lila's door and stepped inside. She was on the floor, drawing again. I sat beside her. She didn't look at me, just slid the paper closer so I could see it. Another sketch. The house again, but this time it was more detailed. Windows, the porch, the attic, and in the upper corner of the house, behind a square shaded in with heavy black lines, a face stared out. No eyes, just hollow circles. "The lady?" I asked. She nodded. "Is she always in the attic?" She shook her head. "She moves around when no one's looking. But she sleeps there. In the locked room." I frowned. "There's no locked room in the attic." "There is," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "But it's not always there." I didn't know how to respond to that. My mind tried to reject it. Logic snapped at me like a rubber band. Attics don't change. Rooms don't appear and disappear. But Lila's drawings hadn't lied yet. That night, after Claire went to bed, I went back up there. The attic was cold again. Too cold. I brought a flashlight, scanning the old insulation, the wood beams, the forgotten boxes stacked in the corners. There was no room, just open space. But then I saw it. At the far end of the attic, behind a tall shelf, part of the wall looked wrong. The boards didn't match. The wood was newer, cleaner, and built outward, not flush like the rest. I stepped closer, moving aside the shelf with effort. Dust filled my throat. There it was, a door, small, narrow, with no knob. My heart thudded against my chest. I ran my fingers along the seam. It was real, cold to the touch. I pushed gently. It didn't budge. I knocked. Nothing. Then faintly I heard breathing. Right on the other side. I stumbled back. A sound behind me made me spin around. Just the wind? No. A creak on the stair. Footsteps again. I turned off the flashlight, heart hammering, and listened. Silence. Then something whispered through the dark, soft and low like someone exhaling just behind my ear. "She knows." I bolted down the stairs, didn't stop until I was back in the hallway, breathing hard, gripping the railing like it was the only solid thing left in the world. The next day, Claire found the tape on the garage box. She opened it. "How did this get here?" she asked, holding up the doll. It was back. The towel I wrapped it in was gone. Its porcelain skin looked cleaner now, shinier. The pale blue eyes stared blankly into the kitchen light. I took it from her, put it on the counter. Lila walked in and screamed. "Why is she here?" she cried, hiding behind the doorway. "She's not supposed to be here." Claire reached for Lila, but she flinched, refused to let her touch her. Claire's face changed then, only for a second, a flicker, like a mask slipped. "Sweetheart," she said, voice overly soft. "It's just a doll." "No," Lila said, backing away. You brought her back. She talks through you now. That sentence stopped everything. Claire laughed, but it was too quick, too sharp. I think we've had enough pretend, she said. I watched them both. My wife, my daughter, one shaking, one smiling too perfectly. The doll sat between them, and I began to wonder which one had brought it back upstairs. I didn't sleep that night, not because of sounds or nightmares or creaking footsteps overhead, but because Claire didn't come to bed. At first, I thought she was in the kitchen, maybe reading or finishing her wine. But hours passed. The lights downstairs went out one by one. Still, she didn't come. I checked the guest room. Empty. Checked Lila's door. Closed. Quiet. I crept into the hallway. Then I heard it. A low hum. Familiar. It was the tune Claire always hummed. Soft. Repetitive. But this time it sounded slower, drawn out like it was being pulled through molasses. It came from above. From the attic. I froze. That tune. Claire only hummed it when she was happy. Or pretending to be. But this version it was wrong. Hollow. As if something was mimicking her voice without knowing what it meant. I backed away, went to Lila's room instead. Opened the door quietly. She was awake. Sitting up in bed. Her eyes already on me. She's not pretending anymore, Lila whispered. Who? I asked, though I already knew. Mommy, she said. She let the lady in. I knelt beside her bed. Lila, I said gently, has Mommy ever hurt you? She didn't speak, but she nodded. Once. Small. Barely there. My heart cracked. I swallowed hard. Did she do something before? Back when we lived in the old house. Lila's lips trembled. She said it was a game, she whispered. The quiet game. I wasn't allowed to talk. Or eat. Or cry. She said if I told you, the lady would take me away forever. I closed my eyes. Everything came crashing in. The sudden move. The perfect house. The fresh start Claire had insisted on. The way Lila had changed. It wasn't just the house. It was something that had started before. Something hidden. And now I wasn't sure if Claire had brought something evil into our home, or if the evil had always been her. The next morning, I tried to talk to her. Claire, I said quietly over breakfast, do you remember who wrapped the doll? She didn't look up from her plate. You did, she said casually. No, I didn't. She met my eyes then. Slowly. A long, unreadable stare. Are you sure? Her tone was flat. Not curious. Not accusatory. Just empty. Lila watched us from the hallway. She didn't come into the kitchen. Later, I tried calling the Mackenzies again. They didn't answer. So I went to the county library. I spent the whole afternoon digging through records, old articles, property transfers, archives. It took hours, but I finally found something. 30 years ago, a woman had lived in our house. Her name was Eleanor Ward, a child psychologist. No husband, no kids of her own, but she took in children, quiet ones, runaways, kids no one looked for, until one day all of them disappeared. Neighbors reported strange lights, screams, children standing in the windows late at night with blank expressions. When police searched the house, it was empty. No kids, no Eleanor, but they found dolls, dozens of them, each one dressed in maroon and black, each one with eyes that were pale, pale blue. No charges were ever filed, no bodies found. The house was sold, and sold again. Families moved in, then moved out. Complaints about cold spots, whispering, shadows that moved. I drove home shaking. Lila was in her room. The doll was back in the attic. Claire was sitting on the couch, eyes fixed on the TV, but it wasn't on. No sound, just static on the screen. Claire, I said carefully, where did the doll come from? She turned to me. I've always had it, she said, but I knew that wasn't true. Still, her voice was calm, too calm, like she was telling me something that used to be true, and now simply was. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching the static flicker against her face. Behind her, in the darkened hallway, a shadow moved. Slow, deliberate. It wasn't Lila. It wasn't me. And it wasn't Claire. But it was watching us both. I made my decision the next morning. We couldn't stay in the house. Not one more night. Claire was changing, or something inside her was. Whether it was guilt, madness, or something darker taking root, I couldn't be sure. But Lila was slipping away, piece by piece, and I was done watching. I packed a bag while Claire was in the shower. Told Lila we were going to visit Grandma. Her eyes lit up, only briefly, before she whispered she'll try to stop us. We crept down the stairs. Every step felt like it echoed through the walls. But Claire didn't come after us. Not yet. I opened the front door, and there she stood. Not Claire. The doll. On the porch. Standing. Upright. As if it had walked there on its own. Its dress fluttered in the windless air. Its porcelain face cracked from brow to chin. And in its hands, tiny, delicate, was another napkin. Help. I slammed the door. Turned. Claire was in the hallway, soaking wet, a towel loose around her shoulders. You shouldn't try to leave, she said, voice low. You'll only make her angry. She isn't real, I said, voice shaking. You need help, Claire. We all do. Claire tilted her head. You still think this is about me? Then she smiled, but her eyes didn't. They were too wide, too bright. Lila screamed. The attic door slammed open upstairs. A roar of wind followed, though every window was closed. Claire stepped forward, slowly, each footfall echoing louder than the last. I tried to keep her quiet, she whispered, but she wanted you to know. Behind her, shadows spilled down the walls like ink. It reached the floor, slithered across the wood like smoke made solid. Lila buried her face in my chest. I'm sorry, Claire said. And then she was gone. Just gone. No sound. No fall. No scream. Like the shadow had taken her. Erased her. I didn't think. I grabbed Lila and ran. We left everything behind. The house. The box. The doll. Even the name Claire had once been. We went to my sister's. Changed our number. Never looked back. The house sold again 3 months later. To a new family. Young. Hopeful. With a daughter. She didn't eat her first Christmas either. They found a note on her plate. One word. Help. Moral of the story. Some darkness wears a familiar face. It whispers through love. Hides behind smiles. Pretends to protect while it poisons from within. Listen to your children when they speak of fear. Especially when they whisper instead of cry. Because monsters don't always live under beds. Sometimes they sit across the dinner table. And sometimes they wrap themselves in gifts that look just like home.